They are coming in.
Hello,
So welcome.
everyone.
Yeah, welcome, welcome. As you come in, we're really excited to have Deborah here today. And as you come in, won't you let us know in the chat where you are from, what type of work you do, and why you're here today and what you're looking forward to learning about. Just give us all the info about you. So as we'll give folks just a few minutes to come on in, but welcome to our Boost Your Knowledge sessions with 4TFM and our very special guest, Deborah Pascali
Oh,
Bonaro. And it's just really, really excited to have her here. This is going to be a hot topic, and I'm excited to hear more about it. We love to do these Boost Your Knowledge sessions. If you're new to them, it's kind of our way of giving back to the perinatal community. And so we really love to, provide them free to all of you beautiful people in the birth and postpartum world. We did get a CEC from ICEA, and so we'll be sending out your certificate with the email that you'll be getting maybe this weekend. It's Thursday, maybe this weekend, but definitely by next week with the replay and with other information into it. So yeah, please, tell us who you are as you come in. We're so glad you're here. It's always fun to see people coming in from all over the world, even. And so I see that we've got folks from Jacksonville and from Minnesota. And let's see, New Orleans. New Orleans? Is it New Orleans or New Orleans? Or is it kind of like
It depends on where you're
depends on?
from.
Okay, that's what I wondered. That's what I wondered. Um, but we've got folks from all over, and it's always exciting. So we'll give folks about one more minute, and then we'll let Deborah get started. Um, so again, as you come in, let us know who you are, where you're from, what do you do? If you're a birth or postpartum worker, or in what way are you connected to the perinatal population? Again, at the very end, we'll open up for question and answer. And we'll also be sending out an email with the replay, with your CEC certificate, and then any handouts from Deborah that she'll be sharing. So I'm going to go ahead and give a short introduction to Deborah and then let her tell you everything, because I always find that whenever we let the people who know who they are tell who they are, then we get the whole story. But Deborah is probably, you all know of her already. She is pretty world renowned in the field of orgasmic birth, and she's an award-winning author and filmmaker, and she's also a dual sister in DONA International with us. She's one of the trainers there. And some of you have even gone to some of her trainings in Bali, which is like on my bucket list. I want to go. I can't wait. And so I'm just excited to have her here. And so Deborah, I'm going to let you just tell the people all the things about you.
well, thank you, Emily, for inviting me. Thank you for that great intro. And it is such a pleasure and honor to be here. I am so enjoying seeing all your intros, where you all are from, and my real incredible kind of sister as a DONA trainer. And we're also both on the board of the International Mother Baby Childbirth Organization. Ray Davies there too. So I have to give you a hug and shout out. So, but great to be here with all of you. I think that overall, I think you've got it. I've been a doula trainer for more than 30 years, and orgasmic birth really came out of a lot of that. I feel like as I was attending births and society was just talking about fear and pain, I was seeing that there might have been fear and pain, but there was also joy and pleasure and ecstasy. And I was with people that had these amazing moments. And I was like, we're not capturing that. And so, really interesting that I would be like consciously mad at the television. I don't know if you all do this, but I watch birth shows periodically and I was like yelling at them. I was like, wait a second. They played music that sounded like Jaws was coming, and they have a high level of interventions and cesarean birth. And it's kind of like waiting for the problem. So, in that, in my kind of subconscious mind being so angry, I literally had a dream one night, sound asleep, that I was making this documentary, Orgasmic Birth. And I literally woke my husband up and said, I've got to make a documentary. And he said, go back to sleep and have a different dream. Because, like, I'm not very good with cameras. I have no film background. But if you've ever had a dream that won't go away, like you go back to sleep and it continues and then it continues. And by the time the sun came up, I was like, I saw the whole film already. And I was like, I don't have to know how to do this. I just have to find the people that do. We're all a degree of separation, and I'm all about collaboration. And that really brought me into this. And that was in 2005. So 21 years into it, that film has certainly manifested and took me so much deeper into learning about pleasure in birth. And now I say that we're not a film, just we're a movement. So I'm going to share some of the things that I've learned along the way. I hope it's interactive because I'd love to keep hearing from you in the chat. So I hope wherever you are, you can kind of type away. And I've titled this, which is also, and I'll share with you later in the presentation, my most recent article. And I was like honored to be put in this, but Frontiers, the Journal for Women's Health, dedicated an entire issue to pleasure and reproductive health. And so where I used to feel a little alone and isolated, we're actually coming into mainstream and recognizing pleasure as a really important part of our lives throughout the life cycle. And so my article is entitled Orgasmic Birth, the Anatomy of Pleasure in Childbirth, and it's getting a lot of views and creating discussion. So I thought I would title this presentation that. So today, I hope in this brief time together, we can look at reframing pleasure as a physiologic resource, not as a luxury. Explore how pleasure supports safety, our hormones, attachment. Discuss so you know kind of wherever you are, if there are little ones or other people there, you might want to put on earbuds, or depending how you feel, we're going to talk about the anatomy of pleasure. And I hope I'm going to leave you with some thoughts and ideas to weave pleasure into your practice. So I always like to say, create that safe space for you. Let's just take a deep breath together to welcome this opportunity to explore. So wherever you are, just taking that moment to breathe in fully. And I always say on the exhale, let go of whatever needs to let go at this moment so that you can feel safe with this conversation and be fully present with us. And I hope that you'll return to breath if anything I'm sharing just brings up thoughts and feelings and emotions for you. So when you think about childbirth, just childbirth, what are 3 words that you think about? And I'd love it if you drop them in the chat. What are the first 3 words that you think of, or maybe your clients think of, however you want to frame it? What are just generally 3 words about birth? And I love it. Thank you, Emily. Love, intense, primal. Do we have some other comments coming in there? Pain and fear. Thank you, Candy. Yes, right? That's very much when we ask, our clients, right? Sacred, blessing, intense. Thank you. So there are just so many words. Hypnobirthing students, sacred and bloody, or scared and bloody. Sorry, I was thinking sacred, but scared and bloody. Thank you. So, like, there are a lot of words. And I mean, I'm assuming many of you do this. That is a question I ask my clients to begin with. Like, I want to see where they're beginning from. And we know that we're overusing a valuable, right, technology. The medicalization of birth certainly can save lives, but as we know, sometimes it actually puts people at risk. So we're losing traditions. We often have less support than maybe our grandparents and ancestors that birthed in home environments, right? We're sometimes overusing medical interventions that cause iatrogenic harm. And I like to think about birth in a culture of risk and fear, which is so often. I just had clients in the last day that I couldn't believe the amount of fear and scare that their midwives were saying to them as they were approaching 39 weeks, rather than talking with them about power and joy and this sacred passage to parenthood. So, really, why do we have this culture? And I do a lot of work, as Emily said. I teach every year advanced retreats and birth doula retreats in Bali, our Eat, Pray Doula retreats with midwife Robin Lim. And she says, we offer scare versus care. When are we going to put the care back into perinatal care? So, something to think about. And I just love this picture. This is 13th century Japan. So I want to say that joyful birth, ecstatic birth, orgasmic birth, pleasure in birth is not something new, right? If we look back in birth art around the world, we often see many other elements in birth. So just quickly, can you name, what do you see in this print? What stands out for you? What elements are being brought in? What do you notice in the people, in the expressions? Yeah, thank you. Support, feminine support. It's a circle of women. Yeah, dancing, singing, joy, support. Look at all the words kind of we see in this image of this very ancient thing. Yeah, and that woman, that birthing person is upright, smiling, holding. You see a midwife catching or receiving, and it looks like an elder, maybe the soon-to-be grandparent, also in prayer, and there definitely is a smile. It doesn't look painful. And I want to even say the dance doesn't even look like a gentle sway, right? It's something ecstatic happening there. And the person that's either singing or chanting or doing something with arm up and mouth open also looks like it's not quiet. It's very much felt in the energy of the room. And there's even someone that's outside the space, right? And that person outside is still obviously holding space in a way. So, like, we see that birth brought in song, dance, and we see this in many cultures around the world and many different elements. So now I want to ask you, what is pleasure? I always love for everybody to write their own definition. And, if you can start it and then maybe add it to the chat when you're ready, but definitely kind of an assignment for today is write your own definition of what is pleasure. And thinking back on the print, could any of those elements be perceived as bringing pleasure into the space? Maybe yes, maybe no, but for you to define as you work on that definition. So I want to add that however you define pleasure, I believe it belongs in birth because it supports oxytocin, endorphins, relaxation. People that are choosing pleasure, it really reduces fear and it can reduce perceived pain as well. It enhances bonding and satisfaction. And we're getting some data that pleasure can help repair or prevent trauma. So lots of new science coming up around the benefits of pleasure in life, but also in birth. And I often say we've sterilized birth, right? When we moved birth from home to hospital in the 1900s, right? We initially made it so clinical, and we lost that song, that dance, that circle of women, many of the comfort measures that all of us here are bringing back to birth. And we're trying to bring back all those elements that shift the room from feeling so medicalized. I also have to share, in all my research these years, I'm learning a lot about the pleasure gap, and that women report less arousal, less pleasure, and less orgasm than men. And I believe we carry those patterns with us into pregnancy and birth. When sexuality and pleasure are ignored, right? And we don't honor that the same organs that we associate with sexuality are involved in birth, I think we open up a lot more vulnerability for people to have fear. And I'm going to share some stories about that coming up, to have shame, and for disrespectful care to be felt because they're in this vulnerable place. But when we reclaim pleasure in childbirth, we're also talking about safety, rights, consent, healing, honoring the body's capacity for comfort, connection, and power. So pleasure is a way in to opening up so many important discussions. Now, when we talk about the anatomy of pleasure, these were two articles that were in the New York Times several years ago, where really have a lot of stigma and shame and a lot of missing anatomy. The clitoris is still undertaught in medicine, and it's barely mentioned in perinatal care. We're not seeing obstetricians, even a lot of midwifery texts are not giving huge emphasis to the role of the clitoris. Even anatomy texts have either erased the clitoris and vulva for decades, right? Sending really a powerful message about this pleasure-centered anatomy, or don't exist. And when we erase the anatomy and we don't talk about it, we're really doing harm. We also know, taking the shame part out of female anatomy, that in Latin, in the original terms, pudendum means shameful part. Like shame is built into the language around female anatomy. So there's like a history of shame from many different places that are coming up. I always want to honor that. How can women give birth through their vaginas when they've been a source of pain or shame? And so I really always, and in our documentary, Orgasmic Birth, I never would have made a film, even all those years ago, without honoring the number of people that are survivors of sexual abuse or trauma. And it's so important that we honor them, that there is that education, because this is an incredible time in pregnancy to bring more healing and for birth to be a reclaiming of their bodies. So the book When Survivors Give Birth by Penny Simkin and Phyllis Klaus, for me, is such an important part for all of us that are birth workers. And then two other books you may or may not be familiar with that I love. Oprah Winfrey and Bruce Perry have a book called What Happened to You, but it's all about trauma, but resilience and healing. And Oprah, in her beautiful style, kind of interviews and guides discussions that really honor people's history and trauma, but how they move through resilience and healing. And that's beautiful. And Pussy by Mama Gina Regina Thomaser, I love. It's an incredible book to help people that have pussies or have partners with pussies understand this incredible part of the body, and where there have been shame or pain, but just beautiful ways to reclaim that and to really celebrate people's bodies.
Feeling is definitely number one, right? So building up your pleasure sensitivity. I honestly, this is the basic trajectory, is learning to feel again. A lot of us have a lot that we don't allow ourselves to feel. You know, when I start to work with women, it doesn't feel orgasmic to begin with. And actually, a lot of the things that are coming up is grief, it's rage, it's sadness. And this is typical because we think that when we tune into pussy or we tune into our heart space, it's just going to be lovey dovey and it's going to be flowery and it's going to be light. And it's actually often encountering things that we've pushed down for many, many years or felt that we weren't allowed to feel as women, right? Especially as caregivers and nurturers, feeling that we're not allowed to feel anger. So to start, the work that I do with women often is breaking down those barriers and allowing yourself to feel all dimensions of feeling, not just pleasure and orgasm, which, like you said, pain can become orgasmic, but you have to start to learn how to feel again.
So
But
I love
the
Yanni.
block that I often find with women is
Let
not.
me Yannick Bell is just amazing. I have a podcast called Orgasmic Birth. You can find it anywhere. And she was one of our guests. She does a lot of work as a sexuality educator with women. And we had great discussion about how that impacts birth. So I want to take you deeper into the anatomy of pleasure now. The clitoris is really an incredible complex. And so many people just know kind of that little nub and don't really understand the full complex. So I love it that I teach doulas every year in Austria, and I'll come out of screen share so you can see this well, and then I'll come back to this slide. But one of the doulas who hosts me every year, Angelica, actually crocheted this beautiful yoni or pussy puppet for me so you can kind of talk to the pussy. But what I love about it is we can see the anatomy there, and we see what we always call that clitoral head, right? The nub that everybody knows. But what happens when we go behind is she has the full clitoris that can come out. And now we can see the legs and the bulbs. And I wish we were in person because I think some of the fun when I'm with clients is they put it back in. And as they put it back in, they realize how much space this is taking up and that this is 8,000 nerve endings and it's running through all those tissues, right? I'll go back to the slide so you can really see it. But we're learning that the clitoris, like we know, is designed for pleasure. It doesn't really, what's the other purpose? How is it not having a purpose in childbirth when it goes all through that area, right? It's going around the opening to the urethra, the vagina, what we know as the G spot is really part of the clitoral complex. And research really says that it has an analgesic function in pregnancy and childbirth. And a pilot study that came out not long ago using vibration at the clitoral suspensory ligament, so up here, right, found most participants reported pain relief during pregnancy and birth. So just like in life, if you've ever been that person that like had a headache or something didn't feel good, but you decided to go ahead and self-pleasure or have pleasure with a partner with or without orgasm and found that what was the headache or whatever source of pain diminished? This is part of the role of the clitoris. So I feel like we are doing a disservice to all people by not talking about this, both for people that have clitorises and for partners and
I
providers
had a
that are
mama that
there.
I was working with
Listen
many,
to
many years
this.
ago for a home birth. And she grew up in a very strict religious home. She never said that she had any sexual trauma as a child. I did have some concerns that perhaps at some point there had been some sexual trauma. She wanted to have her baby at home because she was really afraid of the hospital environment. She had some not so great medical experiences in the past, and she was very private about her body. And the idea of being naked in front of strangers in the hospital, particularly men, was just beyond overwhelming and terrifying for her. She wanted a birth at home, as dark as it could be, with her husband not seeing anything going on with the birth. She wanted him in the room, and she literally never undressed or changed her clothes in front of him at all. When they did have sex, it was covered up in the dark. So a lot of disconnect from her own sexual self and possible trauma. And around her due date, she called me up and was just no other way to say it. I can't even say it politely. She was freaking out. So I went to her house to support her and talk with her. And what got clear was that she was in very early labor, and she was just really, really just completely emotional and losing it and freaked out. And so I did some little healing touch, kind of gentle soothing. We made some tea, we talked, we sat together and did some breathing. And I asked her, what is it? What is the fear? And she's like, I'm so afraid of having to see down there, my baby coming down there. What if my husband sees down there? It was like everything down there. It was just like this Netherlands for her. And so I said, with your permission, what I'd like to do is leave you with my birthing mirror. I had a big hand mirror. And I said, I'm going to leave this with you. And I'm going to ask you to go into your bedroom. It was early morning, so it was dim light still. I'm going to ask you to go in your bedroom and take off your pants and your underwear and just have a look down there and try to give some appreciation and some love. That's it. And she called. I checked in with her in about an hour to see how she was doing. She had calmed down. She hadn't done it yet. And then she called me back maybe 4 hours later, 6 hours later, in active labor. And not only did she have her baby some hours later, but she gave birth sitting, late afternoon, sitting in her husband's lap, like her leg, he's sitting on the edge of the bed. She's sitting with her legs over him, almost like he's forming a birthing stool in front of a full length mirror. So the only thing between the mirror and her cooch and the baby coming out was me. So I was moving over to the side because she really wanted to see. And it just gives me chills even now. She came to me for a postpartum visit and we sat down and talked, and she said, I never looked before. I never appreciated the beauty of my vulva, of what my body could do before. And she said, just relaxing into the fact that this was a sexual experience is what really made all that difference for me. And it's always stuck with me as that disconnect that we have with our sexual selves. So that's just one example of how it can really, in action, make a difference.
So I love Dr. Aviva Ram. I don't know how many of you follow her or are aware of her things, but this podcast kind of gave me the chills, and it made me really think about how many people are not giving voice to that, right? Are not in a space where that's able to come up. And I think that there's more than we can imagine. So I think most of you know that the hormones of labor and love, oxytocin, peaks both during orgasm, labor, and immediately after birth. And I always like to say that, like, this same hormone needs the same conditions. Your body doesn't say, okay, in order to have an orgasm, I need darkness and privacy and that. But you know what? The day I'm going to give birth, there can be, four strangers, bright lights, and all these other people. No, your body needs those same safety, privacy, and unobserved. Beta endorphins flow in a similar way and provide that euphoria and pain relief. And it's the same. To get the body to turn on, our thinking brain must turn off. So again, asking people in labor to talk and questions and that, imagine making love and having people enter the room and ask you when your last period was and all kinds of questions. So we need safety, privacy, and trust for those hormones to flow in every situation. And then think about the similarities of sex and birth. They both slow or stall when we don't feel safe, when we're watched or judged. Both respond usually to dim lights, to privacy, to soothing sounds, warm touch, and a loving, trusted presence. And both rely on the same anatomy and hormonal cocktail oxytocin, endorphins, and the limbic system. And often they involve sounds, breath, movement, energy, good vibrations, and different smells. So really take time to kind of think about all those similarities for yourself. The throat chakra, right? I love this quote. Expressing yourself freely through sound and song is one of the most powerful ways to unlock the throat and sacral chakras. Silencing women in labor is one of the greatest calamities of clinical birthing. The epidural brought a swift end to the drama of childbirth and meant a labor ward filled with pregnant women on a full moon could be rendered civilized for the doctors and matrones presiding over it. Part of the reclamation of childbirth for women is the vocalization of her needs. And then a second kind of quote in here from Sherry Winston is, the clitoris is just the tip of the volcano. Women have largely unknown networks of structures responsible for arousal and orgasm that even most medical professionals don't know about. This leaves women trying to discover their sexual potential without accurate guides. And Sherry Winston put these pieces together in the first ever accurate integrated maps of women's anatomy and sexuality. So Women's Anatomy of Arousal by Sherry Winston is a book I would highly recommend for anyone that hasn't really explored the clitoral complex. So when we look at people laboring, if we didn't know that they were laboring and we just look at face and heard sound and expression and movement, right? It would be easy to say, is this birth or is this sex? Look at the expressions. So, what does pleasurable birth mean to you? And I'd love to see if anybody has written a definition of pleasure while we were talking that you could share, or if there is, and if you want to open a mic, if that's easier too, to share, what does pleasurable birth mean? Anyone wanna chime in with a thought? Because I think that this, for many people, is a new vocabulary, right? If we're not talking about pleasure in life, how do we talk about pleasurable birth and how we integrate it? And thank you. Experience joy within the intensity. I love that, Kiana. Beautiful. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And so I encourage you all to think about what that means. And, having a pleasurable birth doesn't mean that you can't have challenge, intensity, and pain, right? It's not an either or. We know that as we ride all those waves, there are just many different feelings and emotions in there. One of the things I love to do with my clients when they're pregnant is invite them, and I invite you to do this, is to begin a pleasure practice in life. So over the next week, if you can dedicate 7 days to it, first of all, today, create a list of 10 simple pleasures that you could do. And these can be 1 to 3 minutes. And they don't have to be huge things, right? It's not, when your life is busy, you can still weave in pleasure. And for me, I love my morning coffee. It's at the end of it now. But even making it for me, or smelling it, or having that first sip, instead of rushing to just drink it, I think about it that this is a moment of pleasure, right? I love to dance and just wildly putting on some music and moving around, even if it's only 3 minutes, right? In the middle of an otherwise possibly stressful day. So I want you to think of those things and then have some maybe 3 to 5 longer pleasures, because hopefully in the span of a week, there are some times for longer pleasures, whether that is self-pleasure or baths or walk in nature or whatever. And then I invite you that for the next 7 days, dedicate to doing 3 to 5 pleasures every day. Some days they'll all be simple ones, 1 to 3 minutes. Some days they might be a mix and you're weaving in a longer pleasure. And see how you feel at the end of 7 days. I really invite you to do that. And what I do with clients that are expecting is then once they've had a pleasure practice, then they can bring it into birth. And then they can take, hopefully by now they've been building that pleasure list, and they might have 30 simple pleasures, and they can look at it and say, what would be 10 that we could actually bring into birth? And they might be ones not that they're using during the sensation, although sometimes they are, right? People are dancing in labor, right? So even during that sensation, but sometimes they're in between. And if you integrate that pleasure into your life, then you can more easily integrate it into birth. I think if you've never really claimed pleasure and never said, I have a pleasure practice, and then someone says, well, bring pleasure to birth, you're kind of like, at a loss. Like, how do I do that? But if we can start realizing that, I think pleasure is as important as brushing our teeth. Like, we have to create time and space for these things, no matter what's happening in our life, and we're going to feel different. So this is part of integrating what we call our orgasmic birth approach, right? How could this perspective change how you prepare your clients? I hope today is just having you think of a few little things, right, that you might do differently, whether it's handing them a mirror, right, or bringing their pleasure practice in. And I love, Emily, your pleasures, your morning coffee in the quiet, listening to the birds, singing loudly in your car. I love that. And stretching. What beautiful, right? And even though for many people you might have been doing it, but when you name it pleasure, it shifts it a little bit, right? You breathe into that space. So thank you. I really appreciate that. So you really have to think about, what misconceptions do you have, or have you encountered with others in regarding pleasure in birth, right? Yeah. And thank you, Emily. You never thought of naming it pleasure. Yeah. And it's so important, right? Because we name things, challenge, pain, like we have a lot of words for the difficult things, but we don't have enough words for how do we shift into that pleasure, which then for many people can hold joy and ecstasy and many other feelings and connection. So just some data for you. This came out of Lamaze's Journal for Perinatal Education. Those with more positive sexual self-concepts were better able to communicate with their partners. And this may translate to higher levels of satisfaction with physical intimacy in pregnant women, as both the physical changes, right, and the sexual functioning changes that occurred during pregnancy likely require increased communication in order to achieve sexual satisfaction. And increased communication regarding sexuality has been shown to significantly relate to relationship satisfaction overall. And that leads us to postpartum. My newest book, right, is all about sex after baby. And what we're seeing is that if people have this preparation as part of their pregnancy to go deeper into sexuality and pleasure, enhance their relationship and communication before baby, it serves them in labor and birth. But we all know that first year after baby has some of the highest separation and divorce rates. And often it's the lack of feeling intimate. And a lot of that is around sexuality. So being able to develop these skills and have that to actually supports them through life. A positive sexual self was also associated with a positive experience of pregnancy. So those of us that are doing education or meeting clients prenatally, by not bringing this up and not giving this an opportunity, we're actually maybe missing a piece that's really essential in helping them. We know that orgasm and pain shows definitely an increase, 75 to 100% pain reduction when orgasm occurs. And article entitled Birthgasm explores orgasm as a potential mode of relief in childbirth. Now, personally, I don't want anyone to put orgasm on their birth plan. I think we have enough to do in childbirth that I wouldn't want people to add one more thing, right? And we know that there are a lot of women that never have an orgasm in life, so that would be really overwhelming. Although I have met numerous people that never had an orgasm and had a birthgasm, and that childbirth gave them their first orgasm, which is quite interesting, right? But I think that it's not, if orgasm happens, that's a little extra, but pleasure is certainly possible. And knowing that even the pleasure piece will reduce pain. So we really need to look that there is science coming out to support this. If you have a phone nearby, or as Emily said, she'll send you the link to my article. It is open sourced. So if you'd like to read, and I do have all these citations and research within that article, Orgasmic Birth, the Anatomy of Pleasure in Childbirth. And so my next question to you is, what is orgasmic birth? And this is really important because, just like I said, you should write your own definition of pleasure. And I ask my clients to write their own definition. I ask all my clients to write their own definition of orgasmic birth. I wouldn't want anyone to have my definition or somebody else's definition put on them. I want them to write a definition, and for you to do that, that feels really achievable, that honors your beliefs, your values, your culture, so that you feel safe in giving this kind of new language to what finding pleasure in birth can be. Now, I will share that Elizabeth Davis and I wrote a book, Orgasmic Birth, and we do define it as broad enough to include those people that have a birthgasm. And I think they need to be included because I've literally traveled around the world talking about orgasmic birth and bringing our film. And I have to tell you, there have probably been thousands of people in different places that have waited till the room cleared out, and I could see them going to the back of the line for people coming to talk to me, and come up with their head down, not even making eye contact, and saying to me quietly, "It happened to me." And when I say what, they were like, "I experienced this birth orgasm and I never knew about it. So thank you for telling me that I'm normal." And people said to me they didn't tell their partner, they didn't tell their best friend, they certainly didn't tap their midwife or doctor on the shoulder and say, "Guess what?" They didn't tell their doula. They actually held it with shame because they would say to me, everybody else was talking about pain and how hard it was. And they would often say, "I had pain too, I had challenge, but I had this one moment." And many of them talk about it, that they were like one with the universe. Some people saw it one with divinity, that it was this most expansive moment of welcoming their baby in love. I do not hear people say it was like sexual and my baby got me off. That's not the connection. And I think when we've done analysis of comments on some of our articles, we've actually found that most of the comments that are negative, that say, "I don't want to know my mother had pleasure giving me birth," are typically from men between 25 and 35. So it's been very interesting to see where the blocks are of like, why is that not good? But are you comfortable if your mother had the most pain of her life giving birth to you? There's a lot of questions around orgasmic birth. So I do believe we need to hold that if it happens to someone that they have a birthgasm, they should know it physiologically makes sense. The baby is coming in contact with all the places in our body that orgasm is possible. But having said that, we want to just recognize that for a lot of people, orgasmic birth can be birthing in your power, to be birthing with connection to your body, your baby, your joy, your love, and your connection. So writing that definition is so important. I have a program, Orgasmic Birth Practitioner, and I ask everyone to write their definition. And Jay wrote this as hers, so I share it with you. Powerful, pleasurable waves, sensation, and emotions that flow when you feel safe, private, and respected. Orgasmic energy is expansive and transformative, opening on every level, physical, emotional, sacred, and sexual. Feeling at one with your body, baby, and birth. A birth filled with oxytocin and love. Euphoric, the biggest release, feeling comfort in your own skin, owning your birthright to pleasure and self-pleasure, finding freedom in feeling the you in euphoria, the high in happiness, and the joy in what is justly you, right? Your own unique experience as you flip feet into love. So I love people's definitions. Somebody else gave me this. They got inspired. You know how we do acronyms? So they used orgasmic and they put opening, visualize, feel, see your body opening. R, 5 R's, respect. And Penny Simkin, I want to honor her 3 R's, are relaxation, rhythm, and ritual. And they added rebozo. G spot, how and where does your body find pleasure? A, ambiance for pleasure and love. S, smiling, laughing, and having fun changes our hormones. M, movement, dance, play, wiggle your pelvis and hips. I, intuition and intimacy. And C, comfort in birth and parenting, such as touch, massage, smells, sounds, positions, visualizations, and pleasure. So I hope this is inspiring you to write your own definition. And most important, ask your clients to write their own definition, because then they're the ones that are leading with what feels safe to them. There's so many articles coming out now. This was even a doctor that wrote orgasmic labor and birth. Could it be for you? And we're seeing even in the UK, their midwifery journal has done a big article on orgasmic birth, and again acknowledging that by not connecting birth to our sexual lives, we might be doing harm. So what are the benefits too of orgasmic birth? In 1985, we've shown that orgasm can increase pain tolerance. And I already showed you in 2016, they studied that in relationship to childbirth. In 2015, there are articles about oxytocin being an analgesic for chronic deep tissue pain, and also show that the hormone oxytocin peaks both in orgasm and childbirth and is a pain reliever and increases pain tolerance. So if you do experience a birthgasm or have orgasm of any form of pleasure that increases oxytocin during the early stages of labor, it could act as a natural pain reliever to help decrease the need for pain medication during childbirth. And orgasmic birth, a more pleasurable birth experience with or without orgasm, may also make you feel more empowered. And then there was an article, The Impact of Choice and Control on Women's Childbirth Experience, suggests that this could lessen your chances of a traumatic childbirth or PTSD, because when you're focusing on pleasure, you have more choices and control during the process. So lots of benefits coming out. And as I said, it's more than a film, it's a movement. Not only do we have our book, but many courses. And Dr. Sarah Buckley, I hope many of you know her work so well around the hormonal physiology. She says giving birth inherently and hormonally is a passionate and sexual act. From the perspective of the hormone levels in both mother and baby, we could say that birth is the most passionate experience that we will ever have. And the hormones of love, sex, and childbirth, right, all contribute to that magical feeling. And we need to question, as doulas, nurses, and midwives, how we can help that oxytocin keep flowing. We know that sexual activities can. It is another assignment I give all my clients, that they need to have a list of at least 10 oxytocin enhancers that they feel safe with, because it definitely, by bringing them in, can help during labor itself. But the last bullet here says, and this is Sarah's words, right? Interventions in childbirth can create hormonal gaps that impact arousal, orgasm, breastfeeding, and birth. So being able to have a list of 10 oxytocin enhancers that people can intentionally fill the gap if they choose or need to use any of the interventions can be really important. So let's see if this will play from Sarah. Whoop, what happened there? Maybe not.
I think
Oh,
what's extraordinary is we even have to ask the question, to be honest, Deborah, because it happens in the sexual parts of our bodies, right? It happens in our
right.
vaginas and our vulvas, like they're sexual parts of our body. Our breasts are sexual parts of our body. So, I think in modern birth, in order to kind of have strangers in there and have it happen in another context, we've had to kind of convince the population that birth is not part of our sexuality, but it is. Of course it is, and some of the noises that women make in birth, can sound like making a baby, right? And it's the same flow of hormones. It's oxytocin. We release huge amounts of oxytocin at orgasm. We release huge amounts of oxytocin when we push our babies out, right? So oxytocin is a hormone of sexual activity. It's a hormone of orgasm. It's a hormone of breastfeeding. So, it really emphasizes the continuity really of our sexual cycle. We go from menstruation to conception to pregnancy to birth to breastfeeding and back to menstruation. And it's all part of our sexuality. Also, that actually peak of oxytocin at that moment of pushing, some women can experience that as a literal orgasm. The baby coming down, the oxytocin peaks. I mean, it's the same process as having an orgasm during sexual activity. So orgasmic birth is not just a fancy idea, it's a physiological reality.
So how does it work? Sarah explained a lot of it. I love this is a recent podcast where she said, I'm not even in Earth. I'm in a different space going there to get my child. My whole body is vibrating joy. And I really believe that I deserve to deliver a child with the same sensation like I had when I conceived it. And we have lots of orgasmic birth stories. We're getting so many people that are enjoying it, from people like you, all different doulas and birth keepers and that, but also so many parents are writing us that listening to these positive stories are really inspiring them. And so look at this image. Raina is a midwife herself, but you can see she's reaching down to feel her baby's head as it's emerging. And what does her face say, right? That moment of feeling that baby between worlds starting to emerge out and still most of the body inside. And I think we need more images and discussions that give voice that there are so many other sensations and feelings that are happening here. Now, I love this quote on our podcast with Margaret Jowett. She said, nature might love us, but I don't think nature loves us enough for the nerve, the clitoris, to be only used for sex. I think it provides a primary reproductive function. And another quote I love from Karen Ehrlich, understanding the sexuality of childbearing could lead to improving the health of our world. I do think by sterilizing it away, we're doing harm, as we talked about, for survivors, but we're doing harm for all people because they don't realize what their body's capable of. And I love to ask this, how many of you felt that you had really good education about sexuality, your body, the clitoral complex, all the different ways to orgasm when you were in school? I don't even see one hand up right now, and that's typically how it goes. How many of you got that education from family? Really, really good. You understood what I showed you about the clitoris. You understood the 8,000 nerve endings, that there are different paths to pleasure and orgasm, and understand. Not even Emily in midwifery school. Exactly. Isn't that sad? So really, pregnancy, I hate to say this, but I think childbirth education has to step up. Those of us that work in birth, we have to start connecting people to this knowledge and education. It not only will serve them in pregnancy and certainly serve them in birth, but it will serve them in all their life. Because just like you heard Aviva Ram say, too many people don't even have a name. It's down there. They've never looked at down there. We're missing so much right now. And sexual energy is life force energy. To give birth or to enjoy intimacy, we need trust, safety, privacy, and to enter these altered states of consciousness, right? Our feelings and our emotions can block sexual energy, and we all know that these emotions block birth energy. So negative messages from the brain, fear, anxiety, shame about body image. Aviva Ram's client, I think, captured what many other clients may be feeling but not articulating, and lack of compassionate care at birth about people's privacy and body can impact birth. So to get the body to turn on, the brain must turn off. So how do you hold safe space for sensual and sacred birth, and I would add orgasmic birth? What do you need to heal and to expand to prepare for birth, for the kind that you and your clients desire? And I include you because sometimes as providers, our barrier to talking about this is our own lack of knowledge or our own pain or our own shame. And so I like to say it starts with us to take that journey of really understanding your anatomy of pleasure and then being able to gently and when appropriate guide your clients. And our hormones are contagious. I'm going to go quick on this for a second. I'm not going to share that podcast, but I think when we're holding space for sensual and sacred, we need to prioritize the same environment that we make a baby, can be one to birth a baby. And even if we're using other technology to conceive, what are that ideal environment for intimacy? Low lights, warmth, minimal interventions. Think about breath, sound, movement, touch. Tools, and I'm about to show you our Fin Pleasure Vibe to follow what feels good and safe, and always offer an invitation. There's never pressure. Pleasure is always about consent, choice, and cultural sensitivity and safety. So I want to introduce our newest thing. I've spent years in research about pleasure and learning that vibration can be a great tool. We've partnered with Dame, a Brooklyn-based company that's women-owned and women-designed. I learned early on a lot of pleasure companies are not female-driven, and we partnered with them to offer the first vibe for childbirth. And so it is really wonderful for clitoral stimulation. It helps people relax, distract from pain. It supports oxytocin flow. Many people have described it as a pain management tool, and they've all said not inherently sexual, right? When practiced in pregnancy, it can feel familiar and safe. Using a vibrator and having my husband help with some clitoral stimulation got me through the worst of a very long induction, Kate said. We did a survey and we found that a third of people expressed an interest in having privacy to explore self-pleasure in labor. We know it's not for everyone, but I hope you're considering how might birth feel different when you see pleasure as a physiologic resource alongside safety and consent. Really ask yourself, what shifts could you imagine in your own presence there, in confidence and satisfaction as a practitioner when you make more room for comfort, joy, and oxytocin-rich moments, no matter how birth unfolds? And what do you wish every caregiver understood about birth and pleasure? And that could reduce fear and trauma and increase dignity and connection for the families you serve. So I have a scannable, but this will go in the notes. I'm offering you all a free masterclass that will take you through some of this and more. If you'd like to just have a little bit more with me, I hope you'll take advantage of this for free. I hope you'll listen to our podcast, and we have a discount if you haven't seen our film or you haven't seen it in a while, or you'd like to have our book, How to Have Your O Birth. We will put all of these in the notes so you will have these links. And as I end, I'm just sharing that pleasure vibe for you. It fits right. It can stay here. You could take this off if you don't want it, but this way, if in between surges, it can hang, fits right there on your fingers. It can go on shoulders, lower back. It helps for postpartum healing if there's been any tears. It's great for plugged ducts. We have a whole medical advisory board that is giving everyone lots of information on ways that they can safely use it in pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and after. It's 5 speeds, waterproof, and rechargeable with your phone charger. And of course, if someone comes in the room, very discreet to be able to put away. So I thank you so much for having me here today. I hope this just opened up for you some new thoughts. I'd love to ask you all in the chat to share a word that's coming to you. How are you feeling? Just a word or two of feedback, or more if you want, with me sharing this today. I'd love to just have that check in, and please share honestly what that feeling is, just so I have that to gauge. Thank you. I'm hearing warm, empowering, excited to share. Thank you. And for anyone here, if anything came up that you don't want to share here, but you want to keep private, you can always email me at deborah@orgasmicbirth.com. So I always welcome feedback and want to honor if other things came up for you. I'm always here to listen. And please tag us on Instagram. If something came up today, post out that you want to share and tag Orgasmic Birth. We'd love to share and have a conversation with you there as well.
Thank you so much. This was fabulous. I just, I have so much to think about, and I have a long car ride this afternoon, so it's a great time for me to think about it. But I think we all like, I don't know, I can't speak for everyone else, but I just kind of feel like, wow, the stuff I haven't thought about before, and the ways to implement some of these things and to share with my clients. I'm really excited about it. No pun intended. I'm really, but I am really excited to share that with them. And I feel like, I mean, just looking at, some of the comments of what people have been thinking about, I think we all probably feel the same way. I know you have another meeting coming up almost immediately, but we will share everything in the email coming out. We will send links um, galore. And just, if you haven't already been following um, Deborah, either on Instagram and also her podcast, we will send that information as well. But yeah, I know what I'm going to be listening to in the car as I drive today. Thank you for giving me something to listen to. Um, so yeah, Liz has said this info has given me a new perspective in this area. And I think that's probably true for all of us. I don't know if anyone else wants to quickly comment and come off of mute and just share. But Deborah, we just thank you so much for spending this time with us. And yeah, if anyone's got anything to say quickly, go ahead.
This is Ray. As a doula trainer, I'm just going to really be quick because I have to be on the same meeting Deborah has to be on in a few minutes. Um, and that as a doula trainer, I spent a lot of time reframing traditional birth words so people think of birth differently. And when this film came out and she titled it Orgasmic Birth, people were going, whoa. And I just turned around and I said, listen. That is a great reframe to start thinking. The whole purpose of that film is to take and think of and look at birth differently. Because we've seen it the worst way and heard it the worst way. So I thank you, Deborah, from the bottom of my heart, and you are awesome.
Oh, thank you for that feedback, Ray. You are awesome too. And I really want to thank you all because I know it's not easy, right, to show up at a talk around orgasmic birth, the anatomy of pleasure. So I thank you for keeping yourself safe, being open, and I look forward to hearing wherever this brings you in your own kind of personal exploration. And I love to hear from you. So if you do more work and then you end up bringing it to clients, I'm always open and join us if you want to come into our community to do more around this. We're always open to having you as a part of it as well.
Yeah, thank you again so much. It's kind of interesting because our newest course at 4TFM is Prep for Partner. And it's a course that is focused to the partner to really help them be a fabulous birth partner. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh gosh, maybe it's time to edit already. Edit and add. I usually do that about every 2 years to all of our courses, but I'm sitting here thinking, well, it's almost been out for 2 years. Is it time? Because you just made some amazing points that I feel like need to be included in that course. But certainly for all of us, when we're working with our clients, we should be including this with our prenatals with them and our postpartum visits, even, So thank you again. I think you've kind of opened all our minds to thinking about things differently and with a different focus as well. And I think that's so important. And that's part of what I love about these Boost Your Knowledge sessions, not to put a plug in, but yes, put a plug in for the Boost Your Knowledge sessions. I love like when people are coming in and just sharing what they're passionate about. Again, no pun intended, but yes, what they're passionate about, because we need to learn from one another. And so thank you for